Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for AccessLEAD Tips for Proposal Writing. Today's presentation comes to you from the John F. Kennedy Center for Performing Arts. Today, our presenters will share tips to help you write a successful proposal for the 2022 LEAD Conference, which is taking place August 1st through 5th in Raleigh, North Carolina. I am Kate Lichter, and I will be your webinar moderator. Before we get going, I'd like to take a brief moment to introduce you to the Zoom webinar platform. Broadcast messages from the Kennedy Center team, such as links for a survey or registration for future events, appear in the chat box, which you can select from the control panel along the bottom of your window. If you need to leave the webinar early, you can leave it by clicking the Leave Webinar button in the bottom right corner. A recording of this webinar will be available afterwards, so you can catch up on any parts you miss. The built-in audio output is your computer's internal speakers. You may use your cell phone to call in as well. If you get disconnected or have trouble hearing the presenter, make sure you have clicked the Join Audio button. Please remember that if you use your phone to call in, you should mute your computer's audio speakers. You can submit comments, questions, or answers to questions using the Q&A option, which you can select from the bottom panel. Please note that this is different than the chat box and allows moderators to view your questions. I will monitor this screen throughout the webinar. Today's presentation will be conducted over a screen share. You may adjust your view by selecting view options from the top panel. You may also expand your view to a full screen. Today's presentation will be captioned and signed by an ASL interpreter. To view the captions within Zoom, please click the CC button at the bottom panel. To view the captions in an external browser window, please click on the link we've posted in the chat. In order to pin the interpreter's video, click on the ellipses in the top right corner of the video and choose the Pin Video option. At various points during today's presentation, there will be opportunities to ask questions of the presenter. During this time, please type your questions into the Q&A box or raise your hand if you would like to voice your question. We will send out a follow-up email with a link to the recording of today's presentation and a copy of the webinar transcript. This means you can go back and watch the recording and review supplemental materials in addition to any notes you take during the webinar itself. The next AccessLEAD session is Proposal Office Hours on December 7th from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern. Please register to drop in and ask a question that you might have about your proposal. If you are active on social media, I invite you to connect with us using hashtag KCLEAD. On Facebook, we are VSA International, and on Twitter and Instagram, we are AccessLEAD. We would love to engage with you. And with that, I will hand it over to the webinar presenter.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hannah Goodwin, and I am currently the Kennedy Center's lead content coordinator. Just a little bit of background, if I don't know you. I was the manager of accessibility at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston for almost 20 years, leaving that institution at the end of 2020. And I've worked with a number of other museums and other types of cultural institutions as well, and have been an avid lead goer since I think maybe year 2 or 3. And I'm really excited to be here today and super excited that our call for proposals is out and that you all are here. So I'm going to just quickly go through the agenda and just do a quick overview of LEAD, the LEAD conference, talk a bit about the process of submitting proposals and review, the different session types. You'll get some writing tips, language and goals. We'll run through the different topic tracks. And during those sections, Sarah Coren will be presenting. And then be breaking down a few pieces of the proposal form and talking about presenter expectations. As Kate indicated, if there are questions that come up that are timely and we know aren't going to be covered at other points during the presentation, then we'll pause then and take those questions, but are also really hoping to have a good amount of time for Q&A at the end. So this should say 20 plus years of leadership. The lead in leadership, referring to leadership exchange in arts and disability, because it has been on pause, as you know, for 2020 and 2021, but people working in the area, that piece hasn't stopped, the networking hasn't stopped, but we are really excited to be bringing the conference back next August in 2022. And I just want a brief overview. The LEAD conference started, it wasn't titled that then, with, I believe it was 15 representatives from different theater organizations, performance-based organizations, getting together to share information, address issues around accessibility in the cultural sector. And from there, it's really grown into a conference that brings together people from all different types of cultural organizations and has a focus of a very proactive and deliberate focus that moves things forward. So an attention to customer service, and civil rights. There's an emphasis on practical information and skills. So in this context of thinking about writing proposals, it's really important to remember that. The goal is to share information, skills, tips, best practices, etc. An emphasis on active engagement, so that the participants in the different sessions are a part of that session, and also addressing the range of learners that there are in the world and that always show up at LEAD. So again, thinking about writing a proposal, and just the emphasis of LEAD is really all about sharing information, actively engaging people, sharing our thinking, et cetera, with the goal of moving things forward. You know, underneath everything is moving things forward in the cultural sector for everyone, for people with disabilities. And the primary way, or I would say the framework that happens in, is sharing information and doing it together. So the network continues to grow and we all continue to progress. So one thing I really want to highlight is that the call for proposals went out with a submission deadline of midnight January 1st, which is not the case. So that was my mistake. I will own that one. And the deadline is midnight January 3rd, 2022. And I'm just going to run through a couple of things related to the proposal process. Incomplete proposals will not be accepted. One of the reasons we're having this today and having office hours and trying to be available to everyone is that if you have questions, if you have concerns, then please reach out to us. We can work together with you. The proposals. So just to look back, in 2019, there were just around, I want to say 140 proposals, may have even been a little bit more than that. So a substantial number of proposals. Each proposal is reviewed by a team of volunteer reviewers with Kennedy Center staff involved as well. There are proposal review guidelines that all of the volunteer reviewers will go through, and which basically means that adhering to the goals of the LEAD conference and the Kennedy Center goals and philosophy behind the LEAD conference. Each proposal is scored, and the collective scoring by a number of reviewers is looked at, but it's certainly not the only thing. There are multiple reviewers per proposal. Everyone works hard to avoid a conflict of interest. For example, you can be a volunteer reviewer and submit proposals to LEAD. And of course, you would not be reviewing your own proposal, nor would you be reviewing proposal of close colleagues that you may work with within your own institution or possibly a network. There are discussions for clarification, questions that come up, looking at overlap between proposals, et cetera, et cetera. Things that might come out of that time are questions that go back to the proposal submitter. And so it's not simply the scoring that determines whether or not a proposal makes it all the way through to the LEAD process. The goal is for notifications to go out on March 15th, 2022, which we certainly hope will happen. And I just want to pause for a second and see if there are any questions related to the process or the LEAD conference in general.
Just remember, you can put anything in the Q&A box, or you can raise your hand and we can unmute you if you'd like to voice your question.
Okay, so I'm gonna cruise along. There are a number of different session formats, and during this next section, I just want to talk about each of these a little bit. You may be very familiar with them, and if you looked at the proposal submission form, you probably already read descriptions of all of them. So I'm not going to repeat all of that. I just want to highlight some key components. So there are 4 different types of 80-minute concurrent sessions: classroom, panel discussion, skill building, and think tank. There are lightning talks, which are quite short, and there are capacity building workshops. So one thing, just to go back to the original overview, one thing that we're really looking at across the board is for that piece of active engagement. So, and that will run through all of these different types of sessions. So the classroom format is looking at practical tips, tools, resources that attendees can use to start or improve initiatives, programs, or services. And again, this is not just information sharing, although that is certainly important, but really thinking about active ways to have participants think about it, ask questions, maybe there's discussion, but certainly a robust Q&A. And again, in terms of the presentation piece, for the presenters to really assume all types of learners in the way that they are constructing their session. So one quick example is that maybe there's a session related to assistive listening devices that is very comprehensive. So a house manager at a theater is sharing their ALD training processes and materials, and also troubleshooting, and kind of all the ins and outs of utilizing assistive listening in their theater. And their interactive or engagement portion could be Q&A, it could be taking information from others who are participating on things that they've done in terms of problem solving, et cetera. But that somewhere in there is a piece where people are are actively engaged. It may be a hands-on component that is similar to what they're doing in their ALD training. So panel discussion, and again, this is one of the 4 that are 80-minute concurrent sessions. So a panel discussion offers multiple perspectives. It includes representatives from more than one organization and a moderator. So here, what we really benefit from as participants, as co-leaders, is that multiple perspective, the value of that may come from different types of institutions, different size organizations, different roles in different organizations, different lived experiences, and beyond. I mean, these are just a few examples. And again, this should be active and interactive. And sometimes the challenge with a panel discussion is that there's just the nature of it. There, with multiple presenters, it can be tough to get to fit in the active and interactive piece. So just to keep that in mind, which may influence either how you're thinking about a moderator or how many panelists you have, et cetera, et cetera. So one example here might be that an historic house, an art museum, and a science museum, so panelists representing each of those organizations come together to discuss family activities. So I'm going to just pause for a minute. I'm pausing for a minute for myself. Yeah, so it may be a particular angle to this that they're talking about. The moderator may be asking different questions of each, the same question across the board, but the takeaway should include the value of those different perspectives. Skill building. So these are hands-on sessions to teach tangible skills, and part of that includes time to practice and refine. So the introductory information and the presentation time should be minimal. So back to that hands-on, really thinking about that hands-on piece. How will the hands-on component work within the session space and that context? And how will you fit in the practice time? How will you fit in that place where people get to refine it a little bit after they have the opportunity to really get in there? How might the leaders interact with participants during the session? And what are the takeaways? So if there could be a sharing afterwards, there could be Q&A or both, or some other mechanism for moving through the material, wrapping things up, etc. So one example of this might be that education staff from an aquarium bring all the components of a hands-on activity that they use in the aquarium, give a bit of a description of how it has developed, how they utilize it, but that the bulk of the session will be allowing people to work through that hands-on activity. I'll also just pause here and say, hands-on sessions are really popular. You know, over the years, I've heard many people respond so positively to having that opportunity to get in and do something and work their way through it. So I'm just putting in a plug for skill building sessions. So the think tank. So this is, whoops, sorry. There we go. It's really a very targeted conversation, but also open conversation, very discussion based. looking at a very brief presentation time, maybe 15 minutes or so, with at least one moderator who is well versed in the topic and has good facilitation skills. And in putting together something like this, a few questions that you might think about are, you know, how will the moderator prepare the group for the conversation, either beforehand or within that presentation time? How might you wrap it up? These are really important conversations and are very free-flowing. So I threw in a couple of examples. One would be to look at representation among describers and interpreters. Another angle on that might be, or way of phrasing it might be, diversification among describers and interpreters. A second example could be creating choices for all visitors, looking at the difference between specific programming and inclusive programming and that whole span in between. And so those are the 4 concurrent sessions. Again, each of those would be approximately 80 minutes and have a variety of forms of presentation, but inclusive of some form of interaction and engagement. If you've been to LEAD in the past, you may remember roundtable sessions, which were concurrent, very short presentations, about 15 minutes each. And the lightning talk is a version of that. It would have one person doing a 15-minute presentation. So again, to be repetitive here, one presenter only, highly focused on a specific topic or idea that's doable in that time. It could possibly be linked to a longer session, almost as an introduction, but it can have its own place, its own merit. There are a slew of topics that would be useful to spend 15 minutes on. I threw in 2 examples. One is an outdoor tactile graphics and different materials overview, which actually is something I had the opportunity to experience at a LEAD conference a very long time ago. And it was very highly interactive, with people touching the different examples and having a robust discussion about how tactile graphics are used outdoors, what materials are sustainable, et cetera, et cetera. A second example is an inclusive a program, a lightning talk that is really focusing on inclusive job descriptions and hiring practices. How things are phrased in a job description, of course, has a really big impact on who might be hired for it, and is a place where historically people with disabilities have been kind of weeded out. Capacity building. So the capacity building workshops are separate from the conference itself. They're going to happen before or after for 4 to 8 hours, for 4 or 8 hours. So we're talking about a very immersive experience where the participants who are involved are really in the situation where they have the opportunity to learn a lot, for engagement, interaction, discussion, and that they're leaving that session with skills and or information to put into use when they're going back to their back home. So a few questions about that, just to throw out there as you're thinking about your proposal, is how would you structure that time? It can be a lot of time to think about, with a lot of variation. And what are your learning and engagement strategies? Is it a session that you would have in a conference room? Would you be looking towards having it in some other facility, et cetera, et cetera. There are also, the example that I threw on the screen here is the ADA and the cultural arts, which was a capacity building session at, I think it was the most recent LEAD, but there's a big range of things that could happen here too. And again, it would really be what kinds of topics lend themselves to this in-depth immersive experience. I know that there are a number of past ones that have focused on staff training, other things related to the ADA, a number of different takes on audio or verbal description, and all kinds of things. So again, these are separate from the conference and would be happening in the days before or after. So before I pass it on to Sarah, Coren, are there any questions about the conference sessions that I might be able to answer?
Hannah, somebody asked in the Q&A, can you please give some examples of how a facilitator might set up and wrap up a think tank session?
Sure. So a setup might be in that initial presentation, talking about some of the most important pieces of the topic, like what was the thinking behind doing this? So for example, sorry, I'm just going to pause for a second and look at my notes to make sure that I am giving you so for example, in looking at the possibility of doing a think tank around representation for audio describers and ASL interpreters, that is a topic of conversation that has been going around for a while, so that the interpreters would accurately reflect the performers or presenters. So maybe the facilitator would present some different background information or different points of view, examples of things that have been done, maybe examples of some of the challenges, for example, with both audio describers and ASL interpreters, you may be situated in a community that has not enough of either, regardless of the bigger questions that you're thinking about in the think tank. So presenting an overview, maybe throwing out some questions for people to think about, and or examples. And then in terms of wrapping it up, a facilitator who can keep track of the different threads that are happening, what you're hearing, so that the wrap up is reflecting back to the audience, the participants, the bigger themes that you have come up with. A think tank is not intended to have a problem solved at the end, although that would be really cool. I think that we all recognize that access is a process, and it's unlikely that one, that there's ever just one solution, and two, that 80 minutes may not be enough time to come to a solution or resolution, but it may, there may be different proposals for how to move forward, next steps to take, things like that. And as a wrap up, for the facilitator to capture that piece of the conversation before the session ends. I hope that answers your question. I went on a bit. Any other questions, Kate, that you think I should answer now that you're seeing?
Nope, I think you are good to move on.
Okay, thank you. All right, I would like to introduce Sarah Coren. Take it away, Sarah.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sarah, or I'm also known as S.A. Coren, and I'm the Arts Grant Director for the City of Raleigh down here in North Carolina. I'm a middle-aged mixed-race woman with brown hair pulled back in a braid. I'm wearing tortoiseshell glasses and a navy flowered dress, and I'm sitting in my office about 3 blocks from where next summer's LEAD conference will take place. I was asked to talk today because I've been reading grant applications and coaching grant writers for the past 10 years, and I wrote proposals for a good number of years before that. But really, I think I was asked to talk to you because I've written and submitted successful proposals and presented at a number of LEAD conferences in prior years. But the reason I agreed to talk today is that when I first started writing LEAD proposals, it was pretty terrifying, and it actually is really not and shouldn't be. When I was writing them at first, they wanted to know all these things I hadn't figured out yet, like session format, which Hannah just talked about beautifully. I mean, doesn't everybody just get behind a podium at a conference and talk? Like, what is a think tank? I understand that so much better now. Like, why should I even want to do that? The session outline, like, how could I possibly know 9 months before a conference what I'll do during every minute of my session? And being the person who I am, it actually took me several years to realize that the process was a lot simpler than I first thought. And so I'm really here today to try and save you all that same time and anxiety if I can. So the first slide I'm going to cover is people and language. And the first bullet is all kinds of people. So first, I just want to go over who comes to the conference, and it's really all kinds of people. So we have folks representing every artistic discipline, working in every artistic discipline, and within those artistic disciplines, working in all kinds of different jobs, from box office to artistic direction, to scenic design, to arts education and teaching. We have folks at the conference with all levels of accessibility expertise, from the people who get voluntold to come to a conference and learn about accessibility who know nothing, to people like Hannah who have been working in the field for decades. We have folks with lots of different communication styles, including the folks who come in and do the ASL interpretation and the captioners trying to translate on the fly. I will tell you, the one community or population we don't see a lot of are hardcore academics and professors. As Hannah mentioned earlier, we have lots of different kinds of learners. We have auditory learners, people who learn best by listening. We have visual learners, or people who learn best by watching or reading things. And then we have learners like me who are kinesthetic, who have to practice something and really get it into our bodies in order to learn something well. So when we think about LEAD people, and these are the people you're going to present to, it's really everybody there loves the arts, even though we all may do it differently. Everybody is interested in accessibility, even though we may know different facets better than others. And everybody is trying to understand and learn what the conference during the conference, even though our communication styles and methods may vary greatly. So generally speaking, we're basically a mixed bag of folks at the conference. So bullet 2 is thinking about your audience. That mixed bag of folks, or the LEAD people, are who you're going to present to. So when you're thinking about your very cool session idea, or the story that you want to share with people about something that you've accomplished, that you want to share, that you want to have other people enjoy, you need to think about that mixed bag of people or your audience, about how best to communicate your idea or story so they get it and can celebrate the coolness of that idea or story with you during LEAD. And number two, the reason why I bring up all these LEAD people is because LEAD people are who are reading and evaluating your proposal. They're the same mixed bag of arts lovers and accessibility professionals and amateurs and advocates I just talked about. So you want to be sure they understand how cool your idea or story is when they read and evaluate your proposal. So for those of you who've never done a proposal, who've maybe presented once in your life or never, who never have to write anything as part of your job, this is great news. Because it means that you can use and really should use what is on my third bullet, which is everyday language, also known as LEAD speak. So the good news for you is you don't have to use any artistic discipline jargon. When writing a dance proposal, you don't have to remember how to spell jeté or pirouette or anything else for that matter. You can just say dance or movement or skip or jump. And that's how the proposal evaluators will best understand what you're talking about. You don't need to use abbreviations or acronyms. You don't have to remember what something like IRS means or IRT or even BLT. You can just say bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich. It makes life easier for you, and it means that your proposal will be easier for the evaluators to read and understand. And because we have such a very small number of academics who come to this conference, it means that you don't have to use what are sometimes called 25-cent words, or perhaps with inflation that's gone to dollar words. So if you're using words that are 3 syllables or more, you might want to think about whether it's an everyday word like complicate or an academic word like oscillate. Keep things, going to my final bullet on this particular slide, keep things plain, clear, and specific. When you're asked to describe your session in general, just focus on the facts. Describe the event that you want to talk about. Describe the arts education class you want to talk about. Don't worry about lots of high style or getting really fancy. Just keep things plain, clear, and specific. Slide, please. Moving on, the next slide is ideas and goals. And we'll start with spinning good stories into conference gold. So here in Raleigh, we have an organization called Pinecone, and they produce bluegrass or roots music concerts that are really, really wonderful. And there was one concert in particular where they had an African-American singer coming to perform, and they tracked down African-American ASL interpreters for the first time to interpret. And as a result, they had a really great turnout from the deaf community to come to this conference. About 20 or 30 people bought tickets for the first time. It was a very big deal for a Pinecone. And at the last minute, unfortunately, one of the staff members couldn't make it to the conference. So the organization's executive director was asked to help take tickets and do front of house and greet people and stand in the back and, make sure that everything went smoothly. So they did the conference. The interpreter did a great job. Both the hearing, deaf, hard of hearing audiences all really enjoyed the event. And it led to a lot more interpreted concerts going forward that had great audience turnout. And it was not in small part because the executive director, who had always been really, fairly supportive of the organization's accessibility work, saw firsthand the impact on all the audience members who had come to that first conference. So that's a story that's very cool and very interesting for folks, but you need to decide, well what's the takeaway? What's the message that you want conference attendees to take away? Is it building buy-in from organizational leadership because it flipped a switch with the executive director? Is it the customer service and staff training because folks coming in had a good experience? Is it intersectionality because you have a concert where you're bringing in interpreters of color? Is it the types of accessibility services and programs that you're providing, or are you going to try to do it all? And basically what that means is, as you think about your takeaways, there's a part of the proposal that's going to ask you about what your goals are with this session. And that's what you're just trying to decide. What's the takeaway? Is it the flipping the executive director? Is it customer service? When you decide what your goals and takeaways are for your session, whether it's 1 or whether it's 5 or 10, you now have an umbrella to help you decide what type of session format you're doing, or what kind of topic track, which we'll talk about in a couple of minutes, you're going to slide into. So with session format, you're thinking about the best way to tell your story and how long it will take. Is it a lightning session or an 80-minute session? Are you going to do a panel where you bring in that executive director and maybe the ASL interpreters, maybe some audience members to talk about the experience of that conference? Is it a one-person podium deal, or oh my goodness, a think tank where everybody can weigh in on how that particular concert went? So let the conference formats that Hannah just talked to you about help guide you in deciding how to frame your session. And moving to the final bullet in the slide, let's talk about crafting your session. So you've already seen how deciding what your format can be can help you craft your session, but also maybe rethink how you're approaching your proposal, because it's really not about you're trying to hit specific bars, like hitting the bar of session format, or hitting the bar of outline, or hitting the bar of topic track. Shift your perspective instead to letting the different components of your proposal help you think through how to tell that story or share that cool idea with everybody who comes to the conference. And because you're putting your proposal in at the beginning of January, it lets you start thinking about all these things very far in advance. In truth, you really won't know exactly what you're going to do every minute of your session until June or maybe even the end of July. But you can start thinking through how you're going to go through your session as you write your proposal. Next slide, please. Topic tracks. So we've already talked about figuring out the point of your session idea or the story you want to tell. And the Kennedy Center has brilliantly provided options for that with the topic tracks. Topic tracks come out of conversations and feedback with conference participants about what they're interested in learning about at future conferences. So they're designed both to help you in framing your proposal and thinking about your takeaways and your goals for your session, but they're also used, kind of multitasking, to ensure conference attendees find content that's meaningful and useful to them when they come. So on the first slide, and the next one, you'll find the topic tracks for LEAD 2022. You can fall under the topic track of art education in the community and cultural sector, building buy-in, so that's flipping that executive director by inviting him to help at a concert. The built environment, which is with the building that concert was held in, customer service and staff training, evaluation and research, identity, intersectionality, and inclusion, or legal requirements. Next slide, please. And finally, you can think about topic tracks like outreach and community engagement, planning and policy, technology, universal design, and finally, accessibility services and programs. Are there any questions I can answer before Hannah takes over for me?
There's nothing in the Q&A at this time, so I think we can keep going.
Great.
Thanks, Kate.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was great. Okay, so if you've not yet dug into the proposal itself, I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. One is the session information section. We are really talking about the basics of what, why, and who. So you can, and this is echoing some of what Sarah just said as well. So what are you coming up with as a title? What's a brief description? And right here, I just want to underscore another piece of what Sarah said, which is that we are asking you to write this months in advance of the lead session. And it doesn't mean that when you write this in, all of this is set in stone. It may be that somewhere along the line, you come up with a better title or shift some things, and there is room and time for that. So why? What are your goals? What do you want people to take away from this? Who, the audience being the participants, and who is that you want to reach? Is it something that is open to absolutely everybody? Has that value across that whole spectrum of people who do access work and institutions? Or is it a little bit more specific? Maybe the first time person who doesn't even have the job of being an access coordinator, but somehow has been tapped with this, so again, those kinds of things, the what, the why, and the who will shape that session information piece. And then the session outline is really about how that's going to happen, so the basics, and again, the basics, because although I think that section can always feel a little bit intimidating all of those months ahead of time. It is a thinking process, and the structure and engagement strategies to meet your goals, that how piece will really help the reviewers understand how you're thinking, what you're after, and that you include enough detail to confirm the workability of the session. Because there are a lot of really brilliant ideas, but anyone who is reviewing really needs to understand how you're going to make those ideas happen. And then lastly, I just want to stress again that the session information and the session outline are two different components. They're two different things that tell the reviewers, give the reviewers different information about what you're trying to do. So if the outline is simply a repeat of the information section, then that would be considered an incomplete application. And lastly, if anyone who is submitting a proposal is essentially asking to be a presenter at the conference, and just to make sure that people know what they're getting into. The expectations of presenters are important. One piece is that you are in good communication with the lead team, as well as your presentation team. And that is what really will allow you to meet deadlines. But also, if you do have questions or concerns, either because of a change in your proposal, or someone on your team or something like that, you can just reach out to the Kennedy Center, lead@kennedyscenter.org, or give a call and get that conversation started. So that good communication will make things work better for everyone. And that also you're coming into this with a commitment to accessible materials, both any handouts would need to be accessible and that the presentation itself is accessible. That does not include things like the ASL interpreters or the captioner. That point of access is handled by the Kennedy Center and the LEAD team. And that lastly, that everyone is in agreement coming in that they'll create a respectful and safe environment, because really one of the great successes of LEAD over the years, the LEAD conference over the years, has been that people can ask, can bring forward sticky situations, things that might have happened at their institution, legal issues, all kinds of things, always with the goal of having information to move forward, to do the correct thing, to bring back home, to convince other people to do the right thing, whatever the situation is. That safe space is hugely important. So that's basically it in terms of the presentation. Questions can go into the Q&A box.
Thank you, Hannah and Sarah. That was great. So we're now at the question and answer portion of the webinar. If you haven't already, we have room and time to take some more questions. Put them in the Q&A box, not the chat panel. And as we're getting started, I'm going to launch a quick poll because we want to know your favorite place to connect with LEAD online. And then as for questions, somebody said, I have an idea and think it would be strengthened by partnering with someone else in a similar situation. Is there a good way to connect with potential co-presenters?
That is such a great question. Actually was thinking about this earlier this morning. So there are several ways. One is if you are on the VSA listserv, you could post a question there, looking at that. You could reach out to the LEAD team, again at lead@kennedycenter.org, and share a little bit about your idea and ask for contacts. If you live in an area that has a cultural access network, knowledge network or consortium, you might throw it out to them. But absolutely, I think that has happened in the past. I know that the LEAD team has facilitated a little bit of matchmaking or just, I guess, networking. So absolutely. And I don't know if there's anyone else on the call today. I know that there are people here who are experienced LEAD presenters. And if any of you have additional suggestions about connecting with people who might be interested in an idea for a proposal, if you could put them in the chat, that would be really wonderful.
Okay, we have a couple more questions. Someone asked, many potential LEAD attendees or presenters can attend because their employer pays. What options does LEAD offer to make it possible to attend, present if your employer doesn't pay or are on a limited income, disability, etc.? And you have a great topic, but can't afford to attend.
Another great question. What I will say about that is there have been many conversations already. There always, I know there have been in the past as well, with efforts to have sponsorship or scholarships. And also I think right now things are recognizing that this is a sector that has been hit really hard. Both the cultural community and communities of people with disabilities. People have been furloughed, institutions are in tight spots, and so on and so on and so on. So the Kennedy Center, it really strives to be able to have the conference be affordable and intends to try to keep costs down this year as much as possible. and that there are conversations really about this very issue, trying to think about how to develop more opportunities for scholarship and funding and things like that. I know that that's not, that may not be a satisfying answer because I don't have all the answers. We don't have all the answers right now, but just to say it is something that is on everyone's mind, and recognition that not everyone has the funds to come. So if you can just keep that in mind, and feel free to check in with us at any point in time. What I would say is you shouldn't let that stop you from writing a proposal. If you have a good proposal, please write the proposal. I think that is really the most important thing.
All right, we're down to about 2 minutes. Maybe a quick answer for, will
Okay.
sessions be marked for various levels of participation experience, sessions for beginners or experienced past LEAD participants, et cetera?
They will be marked as you're writing your proposal. I'm not sure if you're asking as a writer submitting a proposal, if you would mark it. There is a place to indicate who you think your audiences are. As a presenter, yes, you can indicate that. That is on as part of the proposal form. And it's also something that goes into the LEAD conference information booklets, so that someone coming into the conference who is looking for something specific, maybe new, maybe super experienced, or just really trying to look at things related to that they can bring back to their institution, which is going to do a renovation or something like that. They're flagged there for the participants too.
Awesome. Well, that concludes today's webinar. We look forward to seeing everyone in Raleigh. Have a great day.
Thank you for coming, everyone.